The rancher said, "I'll build you a home," and the Apache woman answered, "Let's build ours together." The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, open plains, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. John, a tall man with weathered hands and a quiet demeanor, was already outside his ranch, walking among the fences he had spent years building. The land had always been his life. Every tree, every hill, and every stretch of open field was a part of him. He had grown up here, learning from his father how to care for the land, how to raise cattle, and how to endure the hardships that came with a life tied so closely to nature. Though the work was hard and the days were long, John loved the rhythm of the ranch, the smell of fresh hay, the soft lowing of the cows, and the wind moving across the plains as if it were speaking directly to him. That morning was different, though. The wind carried a faint chill, unusual for this time of year, and the clouds were heavy, hinting at a storm. John was checking the fences near the far edge of the property when he noticed movement near the tree line. At first he thought it was a deer, but then he saw her, a woman tall and strong with dark hair flowing loosely down her back. She looked tired, wet from the damp grass and cautious, as if she were unsure of her surroundings. John called out gently, "Hey there. Are you all right?" The woman stopped and looked toward him, her dark eyes observing him carefully. There was a quiet strength in her gaze that made John pause. He noticed the calmness in the way she stood, almost like she belonged in the wild as much as he did. I'm fine," she said softly, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "Just caught in the storm. I didn't expect it to come so fast." John nodded and gestured toward the ranch in the distance. "You can come to my place. It's just over there. You can get out of the rain." The woman hesitated for a moment. There was caution in her stance, but something about the sincerity in John's voice seemed to reach her. Slowly, she nodded, adjusting the bag slung over her shoulder. "Thank you," she said, and together they walked toward the ranch, the tall grass wet against their legs. As they reached the farmhouse, John could see the storm clouds gathering more quickly. The wind rustled through the trees, and a few drops of rain began to fall. Inside, the house smelled of wood, leather, and the faint aroma of coffee that had been brewing on the stove. John gestured toward a chair near the fireplace. "Sit here, warm yourself. I'll get you a blanket and some tea." The woman smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and relief, and sat down. John returned with a thick wool blanket and a cup of steaming tea. "Here, this will help," he said, placing both in front of her. She took the blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders, letting out a small sigh of comfort. "I'm Aeon," she said, finally offering her name. John nodded. "I'm John. Welcome to my ranch, Aeon. It's not much, but it'll keep you dry from this storm." For a few moments, they sat in silence, listening to the wind and rain tapping against the windows. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward. It was peaceful. Aeon looked around the house, noticing the simple but sturdy furniture, the careful way everything had a place, and the sense of history in the walls. She saw the marks of hard work and dedication, the way John had built his life from the land itself. "I grew up around here," John said after a while, as if reading her thoughts. "This land, it's been my home all my life. Takes a lot of work to keep it going, but it's worth it." Aeon nodded slowly. "I understand. I've been away from my family's land for some time, but returning, it feels like coming home again. There's a connection you can't explain unless you felt it." John studied her carefully. There was a depth to her words, a wisdom that came from experience. He could tell she had seen hardships in her life, just as he had, though in very different ways. He respected that. "You must have a strong connection to the land too, then," he said quietly. "I do," Aeon replied, her eyes distant for a moment. "It's part of who I am." The land teaches you patience, respect, and understanding. It's never just about owning it, it's about listening to it, working with it, and protecting it. John smiled faintly. He liked the way she spoke, the way she carried herself. There was a calm authority in her presence, and it made him feel curious, intrigued, even inspired. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of connection that wasn't easy to explain. As the storm grew louder outside, John found himself talking more, sharing stories about the ranch, about his father, and the lessons he had learned from life in the open plains. Aeon listened carefully, occasionally asking questions, sometimes just nodding as if she were absorbing every detail. He noticed her interest wasn't superficial. She genuinely wanted to understand the life he lived, the choices he made, and the challenges he faced. When the rain finally began to ease, John opened the door and looked outside. The storm clouds were still thick, but the worst of it had passed. "Looks like the storm is letting up," he said, "but it'll be muddy out there for a while." Aeon stood, brushing the damp from her clothes. "I should be going soon," she said, though she didn't seem entirely certain. John hesitated for a moment. He had an impulse he couldn't ignore. "You know," he said slowly, "if you want, I can build you a place here. Something safe, warm, and yours. You wouldn't have to worry about the storms anymore." Aeon looked at him, her expression thoughtful. There was no rush in her movements. She considered his words carefully, as if measuring their weight. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "That's very kind of you, John, but building a home, it's not something that should be done by one person alone. It should be shared, something we create together." John blinked, surprised by her response. He hadn't expected that. "Together?" he asked. "Yes," Aeon replied, her dark eyes meeting his. "A home isn't just walls and a roof. It's about the people who live in it, their dreams, their effort, and their respect for the land. If we build it together, it will be more than a house. It will be a home for both of us in every sense of the word." John felt a strange warmth spread through him. Her words resonated deeply, touching something he hadn't realized was there. He nodded slowly. I think I'd like that, to build something together. To make it ours." They stood for a moment, looking out at the land that stretched endlessly before them. The plains were still wet from the rain, and the sky was clearing, revealing patches of blue among the clouds. The world felt quiet, almost suspended, as if it was waiting for them to take the first step. Aeon smiled faintly, a mix of determination and hope. "Then let's start slowly. First, we need to understand the land, its strengths and weaknesses. Then we can plan something that works for both of us." John smiled back, feeling a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. "Agreed," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time, and who knows, maybe by the end we'll have something truly special." For the rest of the day, they worked together in small ways. John showed Aeon how to check fences and identify healthy patches of grass for the cattle. Aeon taught John how to read the soil, how to notice subtle signs of the land's needs, and how to move in harmony with the natural rhythms around them. They laughed at small mistakes, shared stories of their pasts, and discovered that despite their different backgrounds, their values were very similar. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the wet plains, they stood together on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The air smelled of fresh earth and rain, and the wind carried a promise of new beginnings. John realized that the offer he had made that morning was no longer just a simple act of kindness. It had become a shared vision, a partnership, and perhaps the start of something that could last a lifetime. Aeon looked out at the horizon, her thoughts aligned with his unspoken hope. "This land has its challenges," she said softly, "but together, I think we can make it something beautiful." John nodded, feeling a quiet joy he hadn't felt in years. "Yes," he said, "together." And in that moment, the ranch, the storm, and the wide-open plains all seemed to witness the beginning of something new. A story not just of survival, but of partnership, respect, and the slow, careful building of a home that would belong to both of them. After the storm had passed, John and Aeon began to spend more time together on the ranch. The morning air was fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. The sun had returned, bright and warm, lighting up the fields and hills that stretched for miles. John had always enjoyed working alone, but now, with Aeon beside him, the tasks of the ranch took on a new rhythm. She was careful, attentive, and curious, and John found that he enjoyed explaining his methods, answering her questions, and learning from her insight in return. Aeon moved with a quiet confidence across the land, noticing things that John sometimes overlooked. She pointed out patches of soil that were richer, spots where water gathered naturally, and areas where the grass grew strongest. "If you plant along this line," she said one morning, tracing a path with her finger, "the plants will thrive and you won't need to water as much. The land will do most of the work for you." John raised his eyebrows, impressed. "I've been here all my life," he said, "and I didn't know that. You have a good eye, Aeon." She smiled faintly, a mix of pride and amusement. "The land teaches you if you listen. You just have to slow down enough to hear it." Their days began to take on a steady pattern. Mornings were spent tending the cattle, checking fences, and preparing feed. Afternoons were for exploring the land, gathering resources, and planning small projects around the ranch. In the evenings, they would sit near the fire, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and lessons learned from life. Aeon spoke often of her childhood, growing up with her family in the Apache tradition. She described the ways her people respected the land, the animals, and each other. She explained the ceremonies, the stories passed down through generations, and the careful balance that guided every choice in her community. John listened quietly, fascinated by the depth and wisdom in her words. He realized that much of what he had taken for granted in his work on the ranch, patience, observation, respect for the land, was also at the heart of Aeon's culture. In turn, John shared his experiences growing up on the ranch. He spoke of the long days working alongside his father, the lessons learned from hardship, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing the land flourish through care and effort. He explained how the ranch had survived droughts, storms, and tough winters, and how each challenge had taught him resilience and problem-solving. Aeon listened attentively, asking questions that revealed her curiosity and respect for the life he had built. As the days passed, they began working on small projects together. One morning, John decided to repair a fence near the northern edge of the property. The wood had begun to rot in places, and some sections had been damaged by the storm. He called Aeon over. "I could use an extra pair of hands," he said. "It's heavy work, but I think you can manage it." Aeon laughed softly. "I grew up lifting wood and working outside. Don't underestimate me, John." Together, they carried posts and beams, hammered nails, and measured distances. They worked in silence at first, letting the rhythm of the task guide them. Occasionally, they would exchange tips or joke about clumsy mistakes. John admired how quickly Aeon adapted, and how she brought ideas he had never considered. Ways to reinforce the fence using natural materials, ways to make it last longer against the weather. During breaks, they would sit on a fallen log, drinking water and watching the cattle graze in the distance. John noticed how Aeon's gaze often wandered to the horizon, as if she were constantly reading the land, sensing changes before they happened. "You have a strong connection with this place," he said quietly. "I do," Aeon replied. "It's not just about knowing the land. It's about listening, respecting its rhythm, and working with it, not against it. If you ignore it, it will teach you a lesson, sometimes harshly." John nodded, reflecting on the harsh lessons he had learned from droughts, storms, and failing crops. He realized that Aeon's wisdom could help him in ways he had never imagined. Over time, he began to see her not just as a visitor or helper, but as a partner whose knowledge complemented his own. Their evenings became a time for deeper conversation. By the fire, they shared more personal stories, moments of loss, hope, and resilience. Aeon spoke of her family, the challenges of preserving traditions while navigating the modern world, and the longing she felt to maintain a sense of home and belonging. John shared his own sense of solitude, the loneliness that sometimes came with life on the ranch, and the hope that one day someone might understand and share it with him. Through these conversations, trust grew between them. They learned to rely on each other not just for work, but for emotional support. Aeon's presence brought a sense of calm and balance to John's life, while his steadiness and dedication offered her security and respect. They began to understand that a home was more than a physical structure. It was a space where trust, respect, and shared effort created warmth and belonging. One day, as they walked along a small stream that ran through the ranch, John paused and looked at Aeon. "You know," he said, "I offered to build you a home when we first met, but now I realize it wouldn't feel right if it was just my work. It should be ours, something we create together." Aeon smiled, warmth in her eyes. "That's exactly what I meant," she said. "A home should reflect the people who live in it, their values, their care, and their connection to the land. If we build it together, it will be stronger and more meaningful." John nodded. "Then we start small, right? Step by step. We can plan it carefully, use what the land gives us, and make sure it fits with everything around here." "Yes," Aeon agreed. "And while we build, we can learn from each other. I can show you some techniques my people have used for generations, and you can teach me what you know about this ranch. Together, we'll create something that lasts." From that day, their partnership grew stronger. Each morning, they would rise early and work side by side, tending the land, repairing fences, or preparing materials for the home they planned to build. Each afternoon, they explored the surrounding areas, mapping the land, noting resources, and dreaming together about how their home might look. Each evening, they sat by the fire, sharing stories, ideas, and hopes for the future. Aeon taught John how to identify plants that could be used for building, for medicine, and for cooking. She showed him how to read the patterns of the wind and water, understanding where the land would hold or drain naturally. John taught her how to maintain fences, care for the livestock, and plan for the challenges of the changing seasons. In every lesson, they discovered new respect for each other's knowledge and skills. They also shared quiet, reflective moments. Sometimes they would sit on the porch at sunset, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. The wind carried the smell of grass and earth, and the cattle moved slowly across the fields. In those moments, words were not needed. Their presence together, their shared effort, and their growing understanding of each other's lives were enough. As the weeks passed, they began to imagine the home more clearly. It would be practical, sturdy, and in harmony with the land. John suggested features that would make life easier on the ranch, while Aeon added elements that respected the natural surroundings and reflected her culture. They discussed the layout, materials, and even the small touches that would make it feel like a real home, a place of warmth, safety, and shared memory. One afternoon, while walking along a ridge overlooking the ranch, Aeon stopped and pointed to a small grove of trees near the stream. "This spot," she said, "could be perfect for the home. The land is strong here and the water is nearby. It feels safe, yet open. And we can watch the sunset from here every evening." John looked at the land, seeing it in a new way through her eyes. "You're right," he said. "It's perfect, and it'll be ours, built together." The understanding between them deepened that day. It was no longer just about shelter or survival. It was about creating something meaningful, something that reflected both of them and the land they loved. They were learning that building a home was also about building trust, respect, and a shared vision for the future. Even when small disagreements arose about the design of the home, the use of materials, or the placement of fences, they learned to talk calmly, listen carefully, and compromise. Each challenge became a lesson in patience, understanding, and teamwork. By the end of part 2, John and Aeon had not only grown closer, but they had begun to see the ranch and the home they would build as a joint effort of care, skill, and mutual respect. They understood that the foundation of a home was not just bricks, wood, and nails, but the effort, patience, and harmony between the people who lived there. Their mornings continued with work, their afternoons with exploration, and their evenings with reflection. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they were creating something that neither of them could have built alone, a partnership rooted in trust, shared knowledge, and the quiet joy of building something together on the land they loved. The days turned into weeks, and soon John and Aeon were ready to begin building the home they had planned together. The early mornings were crisp, filled with the sound of birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional lowing of the cattle. The land seemed alive with possibilities, and the two of them moved with a sense of purpose and anticipation. Their shared vision had become clear. They wanted a home that was strong, warm, and in harmony with the land, a place that reflected both their skills and their values. John had already cleared a small area near the grove of trees Aeon had pointed out. The ground was firm but needed some preparation. Together, they measured the land, marked the corners, and discussed the layout once more. "It should be simple, sturdy, and practical," John said. "But I want it to feel open, like it belongs here on the land." Aeon nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yes, and it should also honor the land. We can use natural materials when possible. Stones, wood from fallen trees, things that are already part of this place." They started with the foundation, working side by side. John dug trenches for the base, while Aeon gathered stones and sand to mix with the earth. The work was hard, and their hands soon became blistered and sore. Yet as they labored, there was a rhythm between them. He lifted and dug, she arranged and measured, and together they made steady progress. As the foundation took shape, they began to talk about the inside of the home. "We should have a place for cooking, for sleeping, and for gathering," Aeon said thoughtfully, "and maybe a small corner for reflection, a quiet spot to watch the land." John smiled. "I like that idea, a place to sit and watch the sunset just like we did on the ridge." The first walls went up slowly. John and Aeon worked carefully, making sure every beam was level and every stone secure. Occasionally, one of them would step back and examine the work. "This looks good," John said one afternoon, "strong enough to last for years." Aeon studied the wall. "Yes, but we need to make sure it also blends with the land. People will see it as part of this place, not just a house sitting on it." They added wooden beams from fallen trees, shaping them with care. Aeon taught John how to use simple tools to carve patterns into the wood, patterns that honored the natural flow of the land. She explained that the patterns were not just decoration. They told a story of respect and connection, a way to remind anyone who lived there of the importance of harmony with nature. The work was not without challenges. One morning, heavy rain threatened to wash away part of the foundation. John and Aeon rushed to reinforce it, using extra stones and earth to hold it steady. They worked together through the storm, soaked and muddy, yet determined. By the time the rain stopped, they were exhausted but relieved. "We made it through," John said, clapping his hands to get rid of the mud. Aeon laughed, brushing water from her hair. "Yes, and the land reminded us that we have to be careful. It's teaching us patience and respect." The evenings were filled with stories, laughter, and reflection. They would sit near a small fire, sipping tea, and talk about their day. John told Aeon about the ranch's history, about the challenges he had faced alone, and about his dreams for the future. Aeon shared more about her family, the lessons of her culture, and the wisdom she had gained from her time living close to the land. Each story brought them closer, and each conversation built trust, respect, and understanding. One afternoon, while arranging stones for the wall, John noticed Aeon's hands moving with precise care. "You're very skilled with this," he said. "Have you done this kind of work before?" Aeon shook her head. "Not exactly like this, but I learned from my family how to work with the land, how to shape it without destroying it. Building a home is like working with the earth itself. You can't rush it and you must respect its limits. John nodded, impressed. I've built things my whole life, but I've learned a lot from you already. You see things differently and it makes everything better. As the structure of the home grew, they began thinking about practical matters: windows, doors, and the roof. John suggested using timber from his own land, strong and durable, while Aeon suggested covering it with natural thatch in certain areas to blend with the surroundings. Together, they decided on a combination that was both sturdy and beautiful. The roof was one of the most challenging parts. They had to lift heavy beams, balance them carefully, and secure them in place. One evening, after hours of work, they finally stepped back to admire their progress. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the partially built home. It was beginning to take shape, and with it, so was their shared sense of accomplishment. Aeon looked at John and smiled. It's coming together, not just the house, but everything. I feel at home here already. John felt a warmth in his chest. I feel the same. It's amazing what we can do together. There were moments of frustration, too. Sometimes they disagreed on details: how high a wall should be, how a beam should be placed, or which stones were best. But instead of letting disagreements grow into arguments, they talked calmly, listened carefully, and found compromises. Each disagreement became a lesson in patience, understanding, and partnership. One afternoon, Aeon found a patch of wildflowers near the home's future entrance. "We should plant these," she said. "They will bloom every year and remind us of this place, of what we've built together," John agreed. "A small garden, yes, it will make the home feel alive." They planted the flowers together, laughing as bees buzzed nearby. It was a small act, but it held deep meaning. They were not just building walls. They were creating a space filled with life, beauty, and shared effort. The local community began to notice their work. Some people stopped by to watch, curious about the partnership between the rancher and the Apache woman. At first, there were whispers and questions, but over time, respect grew. People saw that John and Aeon were building something meaningful, not just for themselves, but as a symbol of cooperation, respect, and shared vision. As the weeks passed, the home slowly took shape. The walls were strong, the roof secure, and the interior simple but welcoming. Every corner reflected both of their efforts: the strength of John's hands, the wisdom of Aeon's eyes, and the care they had taken to honor the land. One evening, as they sat on the ridge watching the sun dip below the horizon, Aeon turned to John. "Do you see it?" she asked. "Our home, it's more than we imagined." John nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "Yes, and it's not just the building. It's everything we've learned, all the work we've done together, and the way we've respected the land and each other. That's what makes it a home." Aeon reached out and touched his hand lightly. "It's ours," she said softly, "built together with care and respect. That's what I always wanted." John smiled. "I couldn't have imagined it any other way." "Thank you for showing me a different way, for helping me see that a home is about more than walls." They sat in silence for a while, letting the breeze and the fading light fill the space around them. The home was not yet finished, but it already held the spirit of what it would become: a place of warmth, partnership, and connection. The following days were filled with final touches. Aeon and John worked on the interior, creating spaces for cooking, sleeping, and reflection. They added shelves, benches, and small decorations that held meaning for both of them. They prepared for the first night they would sleep inside, both excited and a little nervous. When the night finally came, they lit a small fire in the hearth, placed blankets on the simple wooden beds, and sat quietly. The home smelled of fresh wood, earth, and the faint aroma of herbs Aeon had placed near the windows. The wind whispered through the trees outside, and the stars twinkled brightly in the sky above. Aeon looked around and whispered, "We did it. This is really our home." John nodded, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. "Yes, ours," he said. As they sat together, watching the fire flicker, they understood that the home was more than bricks, wood, and stones. It was a symbol of their partnership, respect, and shared effort. Every wall, every beam, and every corner carried a story of cooperation, patience, and love for the land. And as they drifted off to sleep that night, side by side in the home they had built together, the ranch, the grove of trees, and the wide-open plains seemed to welcome them. It was a place where the land, their efforts, and their hearts were in harmony, a true home in every sense of the word. The home that John and Aeon had built together stood proudly among the trees, a reflection of both their efforts, their skills, and their shared vision. But life on the ranch was never easy, and the land, while generous, could be unpredictable. One summer afternoon, the wind began to pick up unusually fast. At first, it was just a breeze moving through the trees, but soon the sky darkened with heavy clouds, and the smell of smoke reached their noses. John's heart sank. He knew the signs all too well. Wildfires were not uncommon in these parts, and if one reached the ranch, it could destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. "Aeon," he said urgently, "we need to prepare. Gather the animals and move them to the safe pen near the creek. I'll check the perimeter and make sure the fire can't reach the house." Aeon nodded, her eyes focused but calm. "I'll help with the animals. Let's work quickly but carefully. We can't rush or panic." They moved with practiced efficiency. John ran along the fence lines, checking for weak spots and clearing brush to create fire breaks. Aeon led the cattle and smaller animals toward the creek, keeping them calm with quiet words and gentle gestures. Despite the growing smoke and heat, they worked as a team, their earlier days of building the home together having taught them trust, patience, and cooperation. The fire came closer, crackling and fierce, but John and Aeon's preparation made a difference. The cleared spaces around the home and the fire breaks slowed the flames, allowing them to control the spread. Still, the fire's roar was deafening, and the heat pressed against their skin. John glanced at Aeon, seeing her determination and strength, and felt a surge of gratitude. They were in this together, and he would not have survived this moment without her. Hours passed. They worked tirelessly, moving water, reinforcing fire lines, and ensuring the animals were safe. When the flames finally began to retreat, the ranch showed signs of damage, but the home itself had survived, largely untouched. John and Aeon stood together, breathing heavily, soot and ash covering their clothes and skin. They looked at the smoke rising in the distance, and then at the home they had built. Aeon let out a long breath. "We did it," she said softly. "The home is safe." "The land reminded us today that we must respect its power." John nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And we faced it together. That's what matters. Not just the home, but how we protect it and each other." In the days that followed, they worked to repair the minor damage caused by the fire. Some fences had burned, and small patches of grass had turned to ash. But rather than seeing it as a setback, they approached it as part of the land's natural cycle. They planted new grass seeds, rebuilt fences, and cleared areas for future safety. Each task brought them closer, reinforcing their partnership and their shared responsibility for the land and the home they had built. The experience of the fire also deepened their emotional bond. That night, as they sat by the fire inside their home, Aeon spoke softly. "I've faced many challenges in my life," she said, "but this, protecting a home and a life together, it feels different, stronger." John looked at her, seeing the flicker of firelight in her eyes. "I feel it too. It's more than surviving. It's about trust, respect, and knowing we can rely on each other, no matter what comes." Their conversations often turned to reflection. They shared stories of past hardships, moments of fear, and times when they had felt alone. By sharing these experiences, they learned to support each other in ways that went beyond the physical labor of ranch work. John learned the quiet strength of patience and observation from Aeon, while Aeon learned resilience and the importance of steady determination from John. Each lesson enriched their partnership, making it stronger and more enduring. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the edge of the property, John noticed Aeon pausing to study the land. "What is it?" he asked. Aeon smiled faintly. "I'm thinking about how much the land teaches us. Every storm, every wildfire, every season has something to show. We just have to pay attention and learn from it." John nodded. "And we've learned a lot already. About the land, about each other, about building a life together." Aeon's expression softened. "Yes, and the home isn't just the building anymore. It's us, our connection, and our care for this land. That's what makes it real." As summer moved into autumn, the ranch began to flourish again. The grass grew back strong, the cattle thrived, and the small garden Aeon had planted near the home began to bloom. They had added more personal touches: benches near the stream, a small porch where they could sit and watch the sunset, and little carved symbols in the wooden beams that told their story and honored the land. Community members started visiting more often, not out of curiosity but respect. They saw the partnership between John and Aeon, the home built with patience, skill, and shared vision, and they began to admire the way two people from different backgrounds could work together so harmoniously. Some sought advice on building their own homes or working with the land. John and Aeon gladly shared their knowledge, proud to see the lessons of cooperation spreading beyond their own ranch. But it wasn't just about the work or the community recognition. The deeper impact was on John and Aeon themselves. They had grown emotionally, learning the importance of communication, compromise, and trust. Even small disagreements were handled with care, turning into opportunities to understand each other better. They discovered that a home was more than bricks and wood. It was a space built with patience, understanding, and shared effort. One evening, as the sun set in fiery orange and purple streaks across the horizon, John and Aeon sat on the porch. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of fresh earth and grass. Aeon leaned her head on John's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked quietly. John nodded, watching the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. "Every day. From that first storm to this moment, we've learned so much about the land, each other, and ourselves. And yet, I feel like this is just the beginning." Aeon smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Yes, there will always be challenges. That's part of life. But now we know we can face them together. That's what makes this home strong, not just the walls but us." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade and stars appear one by one in the night sky. The ranch felt alive with possibility, a place where trust, effort, and care had created something lasting. John felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. The fire, the storms, and the hard work had shown him that life was unpredictable, but with the right partnership, even the toughest challenges could be overcome. Aeon spoke softly, almost to herself. "The land, the home, us, it's all connected. Every choice we make matters. Every effort counts." John reached out and took her hand. "And we'll keep building together, not just the home but everything around it. Our life, our connection, and our respect for this land. That's what matters most." Days turned into weeks and the seasons began to change. The ranch prepared for winter, and John and Aeon made sure the home was ready. They stocked firewood, reinforced the walls, and cared for the animals. Each task was a reminder of their partnership and the life they were creating together. Through it all, they learned that challenges were not obstacles but lessons. They discovered the value of patience when rebuilding after a storm, the strength of trust when protecting the ranch from fire, and the importance of understanding when disagreements arose. Their home had become a living symbol of these lessons, a space that reflected both their efforts and their hearts. One cold winter evening, as snow began to dust the ground, John looked at Aeon and smiled. "Do you remember the first time we met during that storm?" Aeon laughed softly, remembering. "Yes, I was soaked, tired, and cautious, and you offered me a home." John nodded. and you told me it should be built together. I didn't understand fully then, but now I do, and I'm grateful." Aeon leaned closer. "Me too. Everything we've done, everything we've faced, it's ours, and that makes it stronger than anything I could have imagined." As they sat together, watching the snow fall gently around their home, they understood something profound. A home was not just a place to live. It was a product of care, respect, and shared effort. The land had tested them, the fire had challenged them, and the seasons had reminded them of life's unpredictability. But through it all, their partnership had grown stronger, and their connection deeper. And in that quiet, snowy evening, the home they had built together stood as a symbol, not only of their hard work and resilience, but of their shared vision, their trust, and the love that had grown between them through patience, understanding, and unwavering respect for one another and the land they cherished. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and the ranch blossomed with new life. The home John and Aeon had built together now stood complete, sturdy, and welcoming, a perfect reflection of their efforts, their skills, and their shared vision. The walls were warm, the roof solid, and every corner had been shaped by both their hands. It was no longer just a shelter from the storms. It had become a place of life, love, and belonging. John and Aeon spent the mornings walking through the fields, checking the fences, and tending the animals. The air smelled of fresh grass and blooming wildflowers, and the soft sunlight warmed the land. The ranch felt alive in a way it had not before, a living testament to their hard work and the care they had put into every detail of the home. They had added little touches that made the house uniquely theirs. Near the entrance, a small garden Aeon had planted flourished with colorful flowers and herbs. Along the walls, wooden carvings told stories of the land and their journey, a reminder of their shared effort and respect for tradition. Inside, simple furniture, crafted carefully by John, provided comfort and utility, while Aeon had added decorative touches that reflected her culture and love for the land. Every piece, every corner, spoke of harmony between practicality and beauty. One afternoon, as they prepared to host the local community for a small celebration, John looked at Aeon and smiled. "Can you believe it? From that first storm to now, we've really made something special." Aeon nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the sunlight. "Yes. And it's more than the house itself. It's the journey, the challenges we faced, and the partnership we built along the way. That's what makes it truly ours." The gathering began in the early evening. Neighbors from nearby farms and members of the local community came to see the home and to celebrate the achievement. There was laughter, conversation, and the pleasant hum of life in the open air. People admired the structure, the careful use of natural materials, and the thoughtful design that blended perfectly with the surrounding land. John and Aeon welcomed everyone warmly, sharing stories of the construction, the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. Some visitors asked questions about building techniques, while others marveled at how two people from such different backgrounds could work together so seamlessly. John and Aeon answered with honesty and humility, never boasting, simply sharing what they had learned and experienced. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the ranch, Aeon led a small group to the porch, pointing out the views of the fields, the stream, and the distant hills. "This is what we've built," she said softly. "Not just a home, but a life that respects the land and each other." John stood beside her, proud and reflective. Every wall, every beam, every little detail, it's a symbol of patience, effort, and trust. And it's a reminder that a home isn't just a place to live. It's a place where people care for each other and for the land they share. The evening continued with stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. John and Aeon spoke with the community about the importance of partnership, respect, and listening to the land. Their words were simple, yet they carried deep meaning. People left inspired, taking with them lessons about cooperation, patience, and the beauty of building something with care and intention. After the guests had gone, John and Aeon stood together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The ranch was quiet now, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant sounds of animals settling for the night. Aeon leaned her head on John's shoulder. "Do you remember when we first met during that storm?" she asked. John nodded, smiling at the memory. "I offered to build you a home and you told me it should be built together. I didn't understand fully then, but now I do. Every day, every task, every challenge, it brought us here." Aeon squeezed his hand gently, and it was worth it. Everything we faced, everything we worked for, it all led to this moment. We created more than a house. We created a home, a life, and a partnership that will last. The following days were filled with quiet work around the ranch. John and Aeon continued tending the animals, caring for the land, and maintaining the home. Each task reminded them of the bond they shared and the effort it took to create something lasting. They laughed at small mistakes, celebrated successes, and learned to communicate even better with each passing day. One morning, as they walked through the garden, Aeon paused to admire the blooming flowers. "These were just seeds once," she said. "Now they've grown strong and beautiful. Our home feels the same way, built from small efforts, nurtured by care and strengthened by time." John nodded thoughtfully. "And just like the flowers, we had to be patient. We couldn't rush anything. Every step mattered." Their home also became a place of learning. Aeon taught John about more traditional techniques for living in harmony with the land, ways to preserve food naturally, how to read the signs of weather, and how to plant crops that thrived without overworking the soil. John, in turn, taught Aeon about ranch life, the care of animals, the maintenance of buildings, and the management of resources. Together, they blended their knowledge, creating a life that was rich, balanced, and resilient. One day, as they worked side by side repairing a small fence, John looked at Aeon with admiration. "You've changed the way I see the land, the work, and even life itself. I can't imagine doing this with anyone else." Aeon smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "And you've shown me patience, strength, and what it means to build something with heart. We make a good team, John, better than I could have imagined." The seasons continued to change, bringing challenges and rewards. Summer heat tested their endurance, winter storms tested their preparation, and spring floods tested their resilience. Yet, through every trial, the home they had built remained a constant, a symbol of their effort and care. Each challenge only strengthened their partnership and deepened their understanding of the land and of each other. One late evening, as they sat by the fire, Aeon spoke softly. "This home, it's more than a building. It's a reflection of us, our choices, our care, and our connection. It's proof that we can create something beautiful when we work together." John reached out and took her hand. "Exactly. It's ours, Aeon, and it will always be. Every moment we've spent building it, every challenge we've faced, it's all part of this story." The home became more than just a place for John and Aeon. It was a sanctuary for the animals, a safe space for neighbors and visitors, and a symbol of harmony between tradition and practicality, between effort and care. It reflected the values they held dear: respect for the land, respect for each other, and the belief that life was best lived in partnership. Over time, John and Aeon found small joys in everyday moments. Sitting on the porch at sunset, sharing a meal in the kitchen, or simply listening to the wind in the trees, each moment reminded them of the home they had built, not just with their hands but with their hearts. One morning, as they walked along the stream near the home, Aeon paused to look at the reflection of the sky and the water. "We've come a long way," she said, "and yet it feels like this is just the beginning. There's so much life still to live here, so much to learn, and so much to share." John smiled, feeling the depth of her words. "Yes, and now we have a place to do it, a home that belongs to both of us, built with care, respect, and love." The story of John and Aon's home spread quietly through the community, not as a tale of grand wealth or fame, but as a story of partnership, respect, and shared effort. People admired what they had built, not just the house, but the life they were creating together. And through it all, John and Aon remained humble, knowing that the true value of their home lay not in its walls or roof, but in the connection, trust, and love that had brought it to life. As the sun set one evening, casting warm light across the fields and trees, John and Aon stood on the porch, hand in hand, looking at the home they had built together. The land stretched before them, alive with the beauty of life and the promise of the future. Aon whispered, "We did it, John. Our home, our life built together." John nodded, his heart full. "Yes, Aon, together." And in that moment the ranch, the home, and the wide-open sky seemed to celebrate with them. It was more than a structure of wood and stone. It was a home built with effort, care, and love. A place where trust, respect, and partnership would endure through every season and every challenge. They had learned that a true home was never just a building. It was the life shared within it, the lessons learned, and the bond that held it all together. And John and Aon knew with quiet certainty that what they had created would last, not just for themselves, but as a symbol of harmony between people, land, and life itself.